Welcome to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're discussing some characters that you might meet in law school. Your Law School Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan, that's me, and Lee Burgess. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the Catapult Career Conference. I also run the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review on iTunes. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. With that, let's get started.
Welcome back. Today we've got an entertaining topic, the people you will meet in law school, along with some tips on law school etiquette if you don't want to find yourself on this list in the future. Now, you might be wondering what we're talking about. Isn't law school just a bunch of students studying the law? As if, right, Alison?
Right. Well, for whatever reason, law school tends to attract, shall we say, a rather eccentric cast of characters, some of whom you're likely to run into for better or worse. So let's jump in. Who is the most notorious law school character out there?
Oh, it's got to be the gunner.
Of course.
Of course.
So, what is a gunner? People talk a lot about the law school gunner. What are they talking about?
They're talking about the person or people, sometimes there should come more than one, in your class who always answer questions or ask questions and talk nonstop in class. Like they always have something to say or add, or they really love to sound like they're incredibly brilliant and so on point with everything. Basically, they just talk.
Yeah, we had a guy, I remember my torts class, that we, after like the second day, just started referring to as the hand. Because literally, like every single time the professor asked for any input, or many times when he didn't ask for anything, this guy's hand shot up. It was kind of Hitler-esque in a way. So it was just like, woof, woof, woof. You know, and at first the professor's like, oh, great, like, you know, this person's engaged, like, I'll call on them. And then by like day 3, they're just like, okay, anyone else? Is there anyone else who would like to say something? Does anyone else have a thought on this? Does anyone else have and you're just like...
Yeah, I've heard another story about a crim law class where a gunner was constantly, talking in class, and the professor was using an example. They were discussing homicide, and he just happened to point to the student, because oftentimes gunners sit in the front of the class if they have a choice of where they're going to sit, and said, so what would happen if yada, 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 and I killed so-and-so, and someone from the back of the room said, it would be justifiable homicide.
Wow.
Yeah, brutal.
Yeah, well, the great thing about this guy, too, was that not only would he, be, up in everyone, up there all the time, with his hand, but he would also, he was really argumentative with the professor in a way that was just this guy is a respected legal academic. I think at the time he was actually dean of the law school. And this guy was a 1L with a week of law school experience. He's well, I mean, in my opinion, I'm just not sure that blah, blah, blah. And you're it's black letter law, dude. This is not, what do you know about anything? Just shut up.
Yeah. And oftentimes what the gunners will do is they will raise hypotheticals. This is one of my pet peeves in law school, is they will take something the professor said and then change it and say, well, what if this other crazy thing would happen? And then the professors oftentimes will roll their eyes and be like, we're not talking about that now.
Yeah, or some of them will humor them for a while, but then it's well, what if this, what if then there was nuclear fission instead of fusion? And at some point it just gets to the point where you're yeah, that's not going to happen. Could we move on to something that's actually relevant here?
Yeah, and students who are sitting in the class who are not the gunner oftentimes are confused about what they're supposed to write down when the professor gets in these dialogues with the gunner. And the reality is, don't write anything down, because what is happening in that dialogue has nothing to do with what will happen in your exam.
Right. I mean, maybe your professor sums it up at the end. It's like, well, there was one good point here. And then basically tells you what the last 20 minutes of pointless conversation were actually you might extract as useful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it can be an incredibly frustrating thing to have to sit through. Because it's like everyone in the room is paying a lot to be there. And we get this person who just wants to dominate the discussion in these totally pointless ways. Mm-hmm. It can be really frustrating. So, I mean, I guess my question is it a bad thing to be a gunner? Isn't it your right to keep talking? You're paying to be there.
Well, it might be you're right, but I don't know that that's really the point of being there. I mean, of course, you should ask questions if you have them. But if you really find yourself manipulating class discussion, you may want to take a step back and ask yourself if some of these questions might be best answered in, say, office hours.
Or in your study group.
Yeah, or in a study group where you can, go to the professor and have the dialogue that you're craving without monopolizing class and kind of becoming a notorious figure.
Yeah, I mean, we're not saying that you should not talk in class. That's not the point of this. And, if you're someone who raises your hand, a couple of times a week and gets called on occasionally and offers something of value or has a question and ask the question occasionally, that's great. That's what you should be doing.
Right.
But if you're that person who is, up there, raising your hand 95% of the class compared to the other rest of the class. If you are combined asking more questions and, making more statements on the record than everyone else in the class, I think it's fair to say you're a gunner.
Yeah, I think it probably is fair to say. And your law school classmates are not going to enjoy that. And it's not a really great way to kick off your reputation.
Yeah, I mean, particularly as a 1L. I mean, I think, the reality, you're a first semester law student. Just accept that you don't really know that much about what's going on.
Right.
And this is a time to be sort of absorbing the material, not trying to prove how smart you are to everyone. Mm-hmm. I mean, because part of the thing to keep in mind is most exams are graded anonymously in law school. So you might think that you're doing yourself this great service by letting the professor remember you.
Yeah.
But they're not going to necessarily remember you fondly.
No.
If they have a plan for how they would like to conduct class and, for the information that they're trying to convey in this limited period of time, and you're consistently disrupting that flow, mm-hmm. I think that's a problem.
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting because some people think, well, the gunner must really know what's going on and therefore is going to do amazing in the class. And that's often not the case. The gunners are not necessarily at the top of the class just because they talk a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you see this, particularly when the results of the law review competition come out. Suddenly, all those people that everybody was like, wow, they must really be on this. They're like, oh, they're not on law review. Who are these other people? Yeah. I mean, some people, some of the people do well. But, and, in fairness, maybe they're just really excited about the material or whatever. But I think some self-awareness really needs to happen in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I think it is wise to at least be slightly aware. And remember, if you have a passion for this topic, you're probably going to get more out of having a discussion with the professor in private in office hours or in a small group than you are by manipulating class discussions.
Yeah, monopolizing the discussion is really not helpful to anyone.
Yep. And the professor's probably going to like you more because you're not.
Yeah. And frankly, it's easier for the professor in office hours to be like, you know what? I think it's time for somebody else to come in and just send you on your way than it is for them to do this in front of, 50, 70, 100 of your classmates. Because, I mean, most people, most law professors do not want to embarrass you. They don't, they're walking a fine line because they want to encourage people to speak up and ask questions. But at the same time, they're trying to get through a certain amount of material. And at some point, just kind of have to be like, I'm not calling on you anymore.
Yeah. And it's interesting, the Socratic method of running a class may feel like a professor doesn't have a plan sometimes, but they usually do. And it is actually kind of hard to manage the Socratic method if you're going to do it well.
It's very hard.
It's very hard. And so, they're asking questions to continue on the journey, to an intellectual journey with the class. And so you want to somewhat play along and let them.
Yeah. If you're going off on your own journey, just remember, you're actually not the teacher here.
Yeah, exactly.
And frankly, at some point, no one cares what you have to say.
Right.
So enough about gunners.
Enough about gunners.
I mean, the reality is if you are the biggest gunner in the class, you're probably not going to know it. So this was probably lost on you. But, if the professor stops calling on you, I think you might need to do a little bit of self-evaluation about why that's going on.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a good point. All right. So, Alison, who else are we going to see in law school?
Oh, gosh. So many fun characters. One of my favorites is like that guy who worked on the Hill. I mean, probably for like a summer at most, interning after college for a year for some local senator or whatever, and just will not shut up about it. And it's like you get to the point where it's like, you're playing in-class bingo and it's like, well, when I was on the Hill, and you don't even have to turn around to know who's saying it. It's just like, I don't know. I mean, all of these things are just like, really? I mean, everybody knows you worked on the Hill after like the third time that you said this. Do you really have to bring it up once a week, twice a week? Like, I don't know. You just want to be like, people, some self-awareness, please.
That's true. I think that's what a lot of people forget is that law school, though it seems like it's strange bubble, is really the beginning of your legal career. And you're going to run into these people for probably the rest of your legal career, Oh
yeah, I mean, like I can tell you in my class who fits this, like who the characters are. Like people don't forget this.
No, and depending on where you go to law school and what community you practice in, it can be kind of a small town feel. It's not very removed. In fact, we both, being based out of San Francisco, I can meet lawyers through other avenues, and it's like 1 degree of separation, maybe. Because they're going to work with somebody that I know. We're going to have a common person we maybe don't think that highly of. Or they think highly of somebody that I don't think highly of. Or like reputations like precede you, and so you kind of got to, it's not to like walk around on eggshells, but you do have to realize that these people are going to be part of your professional community for the rest of your professional existence.
Yeah, I mean, people still talk about like, oh, well, when I was in law school with Barack Obama or with Bill Clinton or with Hillary Clinton, people remember what they were like in law school for better or worse.
Oh, yeah. I had a professor who was on the law review with Barack Obama when he was running for president for the first time, and she put their law review photo with his head circled on her door. So we would all know that she had been on the editorial board with Barack Obama. So, I mean, and that was many moons ago. So
yeah, but I mean, that's another character you might see is like, the future president of the U.S. in his or her mind, at least. Yeah. These people who are running like this bare knuckle campaign to be section leader or to be like the law school student body representative. I mean, if student government's something you're into, great. But, again, think about your reputation. Think about what the future holds. Think about if you are, find yourself running for president. What are your law students or your law school classmates going to say about you?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's interesting. The person who kind of fit that bill in my class was kind of a jerk. And and was a jerk to a lot of people, and it's interesting because he definitely saw himself as a politician, and I think he was very open that that's where he thought his career path was going to be, but I would probably not vote for him because he was a jerk to me.
And odds are if he called you up and asked for a donation to his campaign, you would politely decline.
Exactly. Yeah. So, something to think about.
Yeah, better to have allies than enemies.
Yeah, it's very true. And then kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's always someone who's just like smoking weed and not talking to anybody.
Yeah, and some of these people, amazingly, like they're like the pothead savant. Actually, a good friend of mine in law school was that guy, and I remember in our first class, like he said something, like, he got called on and said something like so extraordinarily stupid that I was literally, this is before I knew the guy, I was having like this dialogue in my head, like, I wonder if maybe he had like a lobotomy over the summer, or like maybe he was like in a horrible car crash and like they felt bad about like, they'd already admitted him, so they let him come. And later we became friends. And I was like, dude, what was up with that answer, like 6 months ago when he got called on in whatever class this was? He's like, oh, no, that's my act, because I never want to be cold called. And so if they ever cold call me, I make sure that I'm just so incredibly stupid and unhelpful that they put a mark by me and basically never call on this guy again. Like total stoner, like party guy. But like a lot of those people actually do pretty well. There was a story circulating a few years ago about the highest, I guess at Harvard, they give out an award for the highest GPA. And I think it was a girl who won it. And like she was just notorious for being a complete stoner. And no one could understand it. But these people exist.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in my law school class, this person existed my 1L year. And then she transferred to Yale. And I remember everybody just kind of being like, what happened to so-and-so? And we all came back and they're like, oh, she went to Yale. And we're like, really? And then we find out she like high scored all of our 1L classes.
Yeah,
like,
you never know.
No. So you just never, ever know. So don't discredit everybody. You don't know who really has it going on.
Yeah. I mean, on that spectrum, too, you'll also meet a lot of, like, high-functioning alcoholics.
Oh, that is so true. Alcoholism begins early and runs deep in the law school community.
Absolutely. Starting on, like, Thursday bar review nights and that kind of thing. And these people, some of them tend to be, like, sleeper guys. It's mostly guys, let's face it. They seem, like, pretty cool, pretty okay, just like normal guys. And then they start drinking. And then suddenly they're starting street brawls with people who are, like, 3 times their size. They're destroying their own computers. You probably don't want to be a roommate with this guy.
Yeah.
So, like, kind of figure out, like, who you're going to be living with and, like, maybe ask some questions. Like, do you, enjoy drinking heavily, frequently?
Yeah, it's true.
Because you might not want to live with this person.
And it's interesting, depending on when you go back to law school, because both Alison and I took breaks. We didn't go straight through. And there was a big difference in my law school class between those of us who had kind of come back to school than those who went straight through. Because the partying that was done by the people who went straight through was unbelievable.
Well, I went to school in New York, and the partying was unbelievable with everyone.
I can see that, yeah.
I mean, I've never seen as much alcohol consumed, or never consumed as much alcohol, like, in my life as in law school.
Yeah, so it is really important to be thoughtful about that, and to also just, I mean, it's not a bad thing if that's like what you like to do, and hey, it's a lot of fun, whatever. I mean, we've all been there, but it is again kind of like your persona. If you're somebody who makes really bad decisions when you're drunk, just think about doing that in front of people that may be a judge someday.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and also, the reality is there are a lot of substance abuse problems in the legal profession, and a lot of these start in law school.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true, because a lot of it is just dealing with stress and, using alcohol as a coping mechanism.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's a lot of pressure to drink. It's just like a normal social thing. But just something to be aware of if you're starting to go down that path where you're like, maybe this is not feeling that comfortable. Like, maybe I should, consider tapering off on this.
Yeah.
Totally fine.
Yeah, or maybe you're starting to get a little bit older and you realize, I just can't hold my alcohol like I used to. And
I'm completely fine.
Yeah, and I'm completely incapacitated the day after I do this sort of party and can't get any of my work done. That could also be a sign that maybe you need to slow things down a little bit.
Maybe you want to turn into the, like, one beer that you nurse, and then you switch to soda water with lime because no one knows the difference.
Exactly. All right, so what about the people who just, came to law school because they love to argue and will argue about anything?
Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, a very common type. Obviously, you're in law school. Yeah, at some point, I mean, I have very limited patience for that sort of thing, to be honest. But it's very, very, very common. Where it's like, I mean, particularly, I've had it plays out a lot if you're like say you're organizing like a group event or you're on a board with people or whatever. I mean, I was like a joiner my first year. I joined like all kinds of boards and whatever just because I was bored and thought it might be interesting. And you just find yourself like planning some event with these people and you've had like a 30-minute argument over which type of beer to buy. And it's just like, no one cares. Like, just stop. And it just makes it impossible, to get like anything done, basically.
Yeah. It's just not worth it. And again, it's not that you can't be yourself, or be yourself. But just again, remember, if you find yourself always being argumentative, that's not necessarily even how you want to be as a lawyer. I mean, law school can be a bit of a chance to reinvent yourself. You're in a whole new group of people. You're kind of starting. You're
developing your personal persona.
Exactly.
Your professional, identity is forming.
Yeah. And you want to be authentic, but you also.
But do you really want to be that person who replied all like 14 times, arguing with everybody else about something completely trivial? Probably not.
Yeah. And is that the best use of your time when there's a lot of other stuff going on that you should be doing?
Yeah, I mean, if you really love to argue, like go coach a moot court in high school or something. Like that's your opportunity. But just try to channel these things in productive directions.
Exactly. And what about the folks that are well-meaning, but they are really there they're clueless, they're hippies, this is all about saving the world, and if you are not saving the world, then you are not doing good enough work?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I mean, obviously law school attracts a lot of people who want to do good for the world, and that's great. I think this can quite easily cross a line for a lot of people into everyone else is terrible and bad, pick your poison, like because you're eating meat, because you're not saving the refugees, because you think that you want to, be paid to work, things like this. And usually these people are like, it's always great when these people get in the argument with like, the sort of law and econ people in the class. And that also rapidly just goes downhill. The first couple of times you hear this conversation, you're like, oh, wow, this is great. Really, really digging into the issues. I'm learning something. By like the 18th time, the same three people have had the same argument about the same policy things. You're just like, okay, just drop it. This is not even related to anything else. So, you've got the well-meaning but slightly clueless hippie that, oftentimes daddy is paying for law school, which is good for them. But, at least, a lot of these sort of fancy schools, this person in a year is going to be looking for a big law job with the rest of you. So don't be too confused about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, now there's the silent gunner.
Yes, as we alluded to earlier, the silent gunner. A silent gunner is a perfectly fine thing to be, actually, because the silent gunner is basically that person who, when the law review results come out, the summer of your first year, you kind of look at them and you're like, who is this? Who are these people? Have I ever seen this person before in my life? And you kind of check back in your classes and you're like, they were in my first semester contracts class. Who were they? And you get out you go on Facebook and you find them and you're like, that was that guy sat in the back of the room and never said anything unless he was called on. Mm-hmm. What's going on here? What's going on is this person was actually paying attention and getting something out of class instead of talking all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
This person was sitting there absorbing the information, doing the reading, paying attention, focusing, but really focusing on the right thing. So the silent gunner, there's a couple of people where nobody knows anything about them. They make basically no impression on anyone. Turns out that they callied every class.
Yeah, it's definitely true. Sometimes those are great people to be in study groups with.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, if you're looking for a good study group partner, do not go for the guy who's always raising his hand. You're much better off with that girl who just kind of sits quietly, comes to class, takes her notes, leaves, seems pleasant enough,
right.
Seems like a nice person. That's the person you might want to talk to about being in a study group.
Yeah.
Because that's probably the person who's going to end up doing pretty well on their test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Another one of my favorites. So, as Lee mentioned, I went back to law school after doing a different graduate degree and working for a little while. So I was actually, because I was a joiner, ended up being in charge of the OWLS Club, the Older, Wiser Law School Association. But there's, and most people in there were great and they were very helpful and whatever. But there are a few of these people who are like Mr. and Mrs. Older and Wiser. And, they've done whatever they've done and been quite successful, I'm sure, and done their thing and learned a lot and know stuff about the world. But somehow they think they have these special powers or insight that no one else could possibly possess. And this kind of, the guy on the hill might be a subset of this one, because it's like, what? Other people know something about the way politics work too.
Right.
Other people, just because you're like, well, when I was on the hill, but Mr. Older Wiser is like, well, in my 12 years of experience working for blah, blah, blah. And again, fine to say that one time.
Right.
If you say that every week,
right.
Stop. Just stop.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this is one of those stereotypes that can really be taken to an extreme, but sometimes it can be great to befriend someone who's older and wiser if they're going to take a more reasonable approach to law school. Because
There's something, I have no problem with people who are who come back to school and have things to add.
Oh, no. I mean,
this is just
the people.
No one else has anything to say because.
Oh, yeah. But, if you're looking at your law school friend landscape and you're trying to pick people to kind of befriend, it can be kind of interesting because sometimes the older and wiser students treat law school a bit more like a job, and that can be a very good thing.
And a lot of them actually do very well because they have a little more maturity. They have a little bit more in the way of personal time management, that kind of thing. They're perfectly great people to be friends with.
Oh, yeah.
As long as they're not one of those people that are just I know everything, you know nothing, little sprout, get out of my way and listen to me. It's these people don't know any more than you do about law school, so don't be dissuaded into thinking that they do.
Yeah, it was funny. One of the ways I guess I picked one of my friends in law school was we were sitting in our first legal writing section, which was pretty small, a subsection of our larger 1L section. And I'm looking around the room, and the only person I recognized there was somebody I'd been at a scholarship lunch with.
Nice.
And I was like, I'm going to go sit by her.
Yeah. This person's probably like kind of on my level.
This person and I couldn't, probably she's not like completely off the wall. She does well in school, and it was right. We stayed good friends throughout law school. So it is interesting to kind of, think about when you're thoughtfully deciding who you're going to hang out with, what everyone's story is and who you want to align yourself with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it can be, it can be a tricky sort of social landscape. One of my other types is sort of like these uber cliquey people, so like these cliques will form like even before orientation or like, within minutes of orientation, where suddenly you've got this group of people who kind of like all look the same, all act the same. They only talk to each other. They only hang out with each other. And maybe for whatever reason, like you were shunned in middle school or something, you decide that you want to be friends with these people and you spend all of your time like trying to break into the clique. Newsflash, not going to happen. Better to pick somebody who's actually like willing and open to a friendship with you and might not be such a jerk. Yeah,
I think so. Law school constantly reminds you of like high school. It's really bizarre. It's really bizarre. I even had a locker. Like you have a locker like I did in high school.
Yeah, I refuse to have a locker.
I
lived close enough that I could actually go back between classes and drop my books because I was just like, I'm not having a locker. Like, I just can't do this.
Yeah, I used to pack my lunch. I had a locker. I had a backpack. It was really shockingly similar to high school.
Yeah, see, I like rebelled against this. I don't know, maybe I was a rebel in high school, but I refused to carry a backpack, which meant I carried this messenger bag that was like massively overloaded and always had pain in my neck. I refused to have a locker, so I'd carry massive amounts of crap around with me all the time so I didn't have to put it in my locker. That might be taking it to the other extreme. Yeah, maybe just accept that you're basically going back to high school.
Yeah, I started with the messenger bag, and then I realized I just couldn't do it. So...
Yeah, there's another type that people sometimes like scoff at, which is the people with the rolly bags.
Oh, yeah.
But honestly, they're probably making the right choice.
I think so, especially if you're like carrying a bunch of stuff or you commute to school, so you need to like basically pack in all of your stuff all day for classes and books and food and everything. It's not a time to be cool. It's a time to be
I think, if you feel like you need a rolly bag, just own it.
Exactly. Just
be like, you know what?
Reality.
I have a rolly bag. Yep. I'm cool with it.
Yeah. And people sometimes ask us, like how to dress in law school too, and like, does it matter what bag you carry or, do you dress up for law school? And, like most things, I think it's just like, just own your existence, but just remember that, 10, 20 years down the road, you're still going to be talking to these people in your professional world. So,
yeah, I think everybody has to sort of, find their own comfort level and do what you need to do.
Yeah. All right, Alison, what's our last kind of cliche person that you're likely to see in law school?
I got to say it. Some people just aren't very nice. This is, a family-friendly podcast, so we're not going to say the A word. But some people are not very nice people.
Yep.
Some lawyers are not very nice lawyers. Those people are all in law school. Mm-hmm. You will see some bad behavior. You might be the subject of some bad behavior. And honestly, I would say just stay away from these people as far as possible.
Yep.
And make notes in your head, because it might be the case that later on in your legal career, you have a chance to screw them over.
Yep.
It happens. It's very satisfying when it happens. I'm not going to say I'm speaking for personal experience, but I'm speaking for personal experience.
Yeah, but don't be that guy or that woman. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Like, like now kind of transitioning into like law school etiquette, like the type of
like what to do. So we've gone over who you don't want to be. What should you do?
Yeah. Well, like this first one is just don't be that person. Be nice. Don't be a pushover. Of course, you need to, you're welcome to express your opinions. You're welcome to be in whatever clubs you want to be. You're welcome to
set boundaries about what you will or won't do to help people.
Yes.
But it's not going to kill you if you build a reputation over these 3 years as someone who's basically nice and helpful.
Yeah, exactly. And, just by not being memorable, by being rude or overly abrasive or putting down other people or doing shady things in the library or whatever it might be, just be respectful, and, you can definitely demand respect for yourself, but just generally be respectful.
Yeah, I mean, these are your future colleagues, and you might need a favor from them someday. You might end up working with them someday. Or, I mean, you might just need somebody to go hang out with and go to the movies for a study break. If you have that reputation as being a complete jerk, nobody's going to want to hang out with you. You're not going to have any friends unless you find some friends who are equally jerky, and then you can all be like a jerk clique. But, that's just kind of like order of magnitude worse, but because you don't want to hang out with these people either. But it's just not going to kill you to be basically a reasonable human being for a few years.
Yeah. So when I was on the law review, and I was one of the members of the board of the law review, someone on the law review wrote a letter, basically a really scathing letter, about how much of a waste of time it was, how he was dropping out of the law review. He was really disrespectful to the people who were running it. It was this really awful letter that I think he might have circulated to the larger law review and not just the board members. And, that is a story that has stayed with me. And every time I run into that person around town, because that's how it goes, I think of that story.
Yeah. And if anybody ever asks you, like, hey, I got a resume from this person. Mm-hmm. What do you think about them? You were on the law review with them. I think you're probably going to mention that story.
Yeah. And that is.
Or at a minute, I'm going to be like, I would probably have some concerns about hiring him.
Yeah. And, he might be incredibly successful and go him, but that's still what I remember. Well, I remember a few other things as well, but they're all along the same lines. I mean, it's just, that's not
people don't forget when you screw them over.
You don't, they might remember kindness, but they're really going to remember kind of extreme things that you do. People are going to remember other funny things too. I think some people are concerned about speaking up with their political views in law school, especially if maybe your political views don't align with some of your other classmates. I think that's less of an issue as just being a jerk.
Yeah, I think that's how you do it, Yeah. I mean, in fairness, in this particular political climate, like, there may be things that you're just like, wow, yeah, I don't see how any reasonable person could believe that. Mm-hmm. But, you're going to have to make a case for yourself. I mean, but it's all about the way that you do it.
Yeah.
And again, like, if you're bringing up things that are just factually inaccurate and repeating them over and over, like conspiracy theories and something, people might start to question your judgment. But frankly, that's probably legitimate.
Yeah. There was someone in my constitutional law class who was very conservative, and the most of the class was not very conservative. And I just remember my professor calling on her, and we all knew what she was going to say basically about anything, but she still said her piece, but she wasn't rude about it. We just knew that she had a very specific point of view,
which is fine.
And she would say it. And actually, it's when I haven't run into her since law school, but if I did run into her on the street, I would not think anything of it. I would just remember she's fairly conservative, not she's a jerk. Yeah. It was just that she has a different point of view in the world than say I do.
Yeah, and I think anyone who has strong political views needs to learn to express them anyway, in a reasonable, reasoned manner. So this is a great opportunity to practice. You don't have to, hide your views on things, but you need to do it in a way that's respectful of other people's views and also, based in fact.
And this is an election year while we're taping this podcast, and I am sure that the law school environments will be heightened. There's going to be a lot of discussion about a lot of fascinating things, I'm sure. And I don't want people to feel like they can't express their beliefs. You just have to think about how you do it and realize that you're in an academic environment where, different beliefs are respected, and different professors are going to have different beliefs. That's just the way it is, Yeah,
absolutely. I think in general, just, whatever you're doing, and I think this is really the key takeaway, just don't be a jerk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
What else?
Well, since this is like high school, you should probably be careful with who you're hooking up with.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of alcohol.
Yeah, exactly. So, lots of people get married out of law school. So, dating is definitely on the table. But you can also get other reputations or have messy romantic things spill over into class. I mean, it can definitely be dramatic.
Yeah, I think personally, like, I think dating someone in your section should be kind of like dating someone you work with. Not to say you can't do it, but you want to think really carefully about whether this is the right time for this and whether this is something that you really want to pursue in case it goes wrong.
I'm trying to think if I knew that many people who married people in my law school class. I don't think there were that many. There weren't as many as I expected.
I definitely know a decent number.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's like a huge number, but I mean, I'm thinking even on the law review, I know of several who like basically hung out on law review and ended up getting married.
That's pretty funny. Yeah. I know a lot of people who met their significant others while in law school. I mean, I did, but he had no association with law school. So
yeah. I think, again, like you just want to be judicious here. Not to say that you can't like randomly hook up with somebody that you just met at bar review, but you probably want to be a little careful. Again, just like high school. If you're like, you meet the 3L and you're 1L and he seems so nice and he's so into you, really think about like what's going on here. Do you want to be like, another conquest of this like slightly predatory 3L who slept with like half the 1L class? Like probably not, I mean, to each his own, but just think about it.
Just think about it.
And on that note, I mean, I think, being careful with people with the drinking really is just going to only improve the situation. For your own good, the good of those around you. If for no other reason, the fact that you need to actually pass character and fitness to be admitted to the bar. And this is going to be a lot easier if you don't have a law school like DUI or drunk and disorderly arrest on your record.
Yeah. And this is not outside the realm of possibility. I mean, people do get DUIs and things like that in law school.
Oh, easily.
And it can really slow down or stand in the way of you passing your moral character, which is a huge problem, or you end up having to hire lawyers to help defend your moral character, which is an expensive problem.
Yeah, or you have to, the bar's like, oh, well, we have some concerns about you. You're going to have to go to like alcohol counseling for X number of months. Like these are just things that you'd probably rather avoid with like, a little foresight.
Yeah. So again, just remember to, be a grown up.
You're building your reputation, and you probably don't want your reputation to be as the guy who was like always or girl who was always like stumbling drunk every single night of the week out of like the local bar.
Yeah. I guess another thing along like using good judgment. Oh my gosh, don't cheat. Don't look like you're cheating.
Oh yeah.
Don't talk about cheating. Like again, like you don't want to be that person. Like just follow the rules. Someone else that we didn't list up there that is somebody that always annoys me is the person who loves to talk about how many hours they study in the library. There's always that person.
That's like the subset of the gunner. It's like the library gunner.
Yes. And so they just love to talk about how they're in the library till it closes every day and how amazing they are. And you just have to ignore that person too. So also don't be that person. Just don't.
No one cares.
No one cares how many hours you study. Like nobody cares. Nobody cares.
And if they do care, they don't want to hear about it. It's just going to make them feel bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, on this point, I would say, this isn't really etiquette, but more like life advice. I think the key here is like, you've got to find your people.
Yeah.
So we might sound really cynical in this episode where, we're poking fun at lots of different types of people. But, even if you meet every single person we just talked about above, that's like 10 people. You probably have hundreds of people in your law school class. There are probably some really great people that you could build really strong relationships with. And I think it's worth finding those people because you're going to need support. Nobody gets through law school alone. It's just going to be a lot more fun if you have someone to occasionally go to the movies with. But, I guess there's also the social recluse who like never does anything or talks to anyone. But I wouldn't be that person either.
No, and I think you also, sometimes you can be a 1L in your intersection. You're like, I haven't really found my people in my section. And that's totally okay. So go join some clubs, that you have an interest in, or affinity groups that you have an interest in.
Yeah,
or
and look outside of the 1L class. Like
right.
2Ls and 3Ls can be great because they're under less pressure. They've got a little bit of insight into the process. They might be willing to go to lunch with you and kind of give you some advice.
Yeah, and I made good friends with people in the class above me through doing certain activities. And then even when I was a 3L and I was on the law review board, I made good friends with people I was on the board with that I barely knew in law school. I mean, we were kind of like acquaintances, but we weren't friends. We weren't in the same sections. We didn't really take the same classes, and they became, really dear to me, and I learned a lot from them. So always be open to these different experiences in law school. Maybe you are doing an advocacy competition, and then you become very close to the people on your advocacy team. don't go to your 1L section and be like, I don't find my people here, so I must not be meant to be in law school.
No, I mean, honestly, like once you get out of like the 1L class and, some schools, they switch it up at the first semester or second semester, like you'll be amazed how little you think about these people that you don't happen to have classes with once you're out of class with them. Yeah. You might see people that were like, you thought were like your great friend because you were in small section together. You'll see them 9 months later when you're 2L and like wave at them across campus, be like, oh my God, we've got to catch up sometime. That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. So just make sure that you keep an open mind and continue to be open to new relationships, because you never know when you might meet somebody that could be a good professional or personal connection, down the road.
Or like one of your best friends. I interviewed with judges who still had the picture of their law school study group and they're like, these are my best friends,
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, unfortunately, we're out of time. Hopefully you find your people. If you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on iTunes, because we would really appreciate it. And you can subscribe so you don't miss anything, and we usually have new episodes every Monday. If you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to reach out to me or Lee at lawschooltoolbox.com or Allison at lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening. We'll talk soon, and good luck in law school.